I always believed that the countryside kept secrets the city would never understand. The silence carried memories, and the wind carried voices. But perhaps the most precious thing the countryside ever held for me was the time I spent with my older brother, Dara, a time that shaped me quietly, like the slow growth of rice fields in the season of rain. I didn't realize back then how important those days were. I didn't know that one day, I would look back and feel my chest tighten at the memory of sunlight on our faces, the sound of his laughter echoing across golden fields, and the tender moments that stitched together our childhood. This is the story of how we created our own world together, one summer in the countryside, when we were young enough to dream but old enough to understand the weight of life. It was the summer I turned 16 when I returned to my grandmother's village. My parents had separated quietly, no shouting, no broken plates, just quiet decisions spoken behind closed doors, followed by silent dinners at home where no one looked at each other long enough. My mother, tired and thin from the constant weight of keeping everything together, decided to send me and my brother away for a while. "You both need space," she told us, though her voice carried more longing than command. "Your grandmother will look after you. The countryside, it will be good for you." So we ended up there, my brother Dara, 19 years old, tall and soft-spoken, carrying a quiet sadness in his eyes, and me restless and confused, carrying a storm in my heart. When we arrived, the afternoon sun dripped into the fields like melted gold. Dragonflies danced above the ponds, water buffaloes lay half asleep under palm trees, and the familiar scent of mud and wild grass wrapped around me like an old friend. Our grandmother welcomed us with her warm, wrinkled smile. "You've both grown," she said, touching my face with a hand that smelled of lemongrass and smoke. "The countryside missed you." And for a moment, I felt something inside me loosen, like a knot that had been pulling me into sadness. But Dara, he stood behind me, quiet. I didn't know then what he carried inside him. I only knew he wasn't the same brother I had grown up with. The house was the same as always, old wooden walls, a tin roof that sang when the rain fell, and bamboo mats that smelled faintly of past seasons. Our room was small, just two woven beds separated by a low table where grandmother placed a clay oil lamp at night. The first few days passed slowly. Grandmother cooked, cleaned, and muttered prayers in the morning. I helped her cut vegetables, feed the chickens, and sweep the yard. Dara mostly sat outside under the tamarind tree, staring at the fields. He hardly spoke. Sometimes he wrote in a small notebook. Sometimes he simply watched the sky as if he was waiting for something. I didn't understand. He had always been the lively one, the brother who joked with me, teased me, and built little tree houses in the woods. But now he was different, and it scared me in a way I couldn't explain. One evening, while we sat on the bamboo porch listening to the crickets, I asked quietly, "Are you okay?" He didn't look at me. "I'm fine," he said, but his voice was not convincing. I wanted to push him. I wanted to ask what was wrong. But I hesitated. There was something fragile about him, something that felt like it might break if I wasn't gentle enough. So I didn't push. Not yet. One morning, grandmother asked us to fetch water spinach from the riverbank. "Go together," she said. "The river is high this season. Don't go alone." We walked side by side along the familiar dirt road. The cicadas screamed from the trees. The grass brushed against our legs. The air smelled warm and alive. We reached the riverbank, the same place where we used to swim as kids. The water looked different now, deeper and a darker shade of green. The bamboo stems swayed gently with the wind. As I began cutting water spinach, I noticed Dara had walked ahead to the old rock where we used to jump into the river. I followed him. "You used to dare me to jump here," I said softly. "And I always chickened out." Dara gave a small smile, the first I'd seen in weeks. "You were scared of everything back then," he said. "Even the tiny frogs. You used to chase me with them." He laughed a real warm laugh, and something inside my chest bloomed like a flower. Then he grew quiet again. He looked at the river, his face softened by nostalgia and something darker. Do you ever wish we could go back? He asked. To when we were kids? He nodded. All the time, I said, surprised at how true it felt. He sat down on the rock, elbows on his knees, staring at the water. Life felt easier then, he whispered. Simpler. There weren't so many choices, or expectations. I sat beside him. You can tell me anything, I said. I'm your sister. He looked at me then, really looked at me, and in his eyes I saw a storm he was trying very hard to hide. I know, he murmured. And maybe someday I will. But not that day. Still, it was the first time in months we spoke like siblings again. It was the first step. The next morning, grandmother handed us a task, cleaning the abandoned storage hut at the edge of the property. It's full of old things, she said. Do what you want with them, just make space. The hut was dusty and filled with spider webs. We opened the wooden door and sunlight spilled over piles of forgotten tools, broken baskets, old fishing nets, and rusted lanterns. But there was also something else: pieces of wood, bamboo poles, planks from old furniture, and scraps of fabric. Dora stared at the materials for a long moment. What if we make something? He said suddenly. Make what? I asked. I don't know, he shrugged. Something creative. Something fun. Something that's not everything else. I didn't fully understand what he meant, but the spark in his eyes felt familiar. So we began. We didn't have a plan. We just started sorting wood, fixing broken pieces, sanding old planks, tying bamboo. At first it was random, just two siblings cleaning a dusty hut. But by the afternoon, Dora said, let's build a little studio. A studio? Yeah. A place to sit, draw, paint, write, whatever. A place that's ours. The idea warmed me instantly. And just like that, we had a project, one that would become the heart of our summer. The following days slipped by like river water. We woke early, collected tools, and worked until the sun dipped low. Dora became more alive as we built. He taught me how to use old nails and how to tie bamboo joints. He measured wood with the same precision he once used to fold paper airplanes. He hummed while he worked, sometimes softly, sometimes loudly enough for the birds to pause their song. For the first time in months, he wasn't quiet. He wasn't lost in thought. He wasn't carrying invisible weight on his shoulders. He was creating. And in creating, he was healing. We hung pieces of cloth for curtains, polished old planks into tables, turned broken baskets into storage shelves. We painted the bamboo walls with leftover house paint, one side sky blue, one side green like the rice fields. We even hung a wind chime made of old spoons and shells. When the wind passed, it sounded like laughter. On the fifth day, Dora handed me a small stool he had made. For you, he said. Every studio needs a chair for its artist. I'm not an artist, I said, embarrassed. You are, he replied. You've just forgotten. The words touched something deep in me. Because I had forgotten. I used to draw, write, and dream, before school pressure, family tension, and growing up made everything feel heavier. But with my brother beside me, those dreams felt closer again. One evening, after working all day, Dora suggested we make floating lanterns. Like the ones we used to make with Dad, he said quietly. I knew mentioning our father hurt him, but it also brought back warm memories. Nights by the pond, candlelight flickering inside homemade lanterns, our father telling stories under the moon. So we gathered banana stems, bamboo strips, and colored paper. We crafted lanterns with careful fingers, like the children we once were. When night fell, we carried them to the pond. The moon was bright. Fireflies danced around us. Dora lit the candles. You go first, he said softly. I placed my lantern on the water and watched as it drifted gently toward the reflection of the moon. What did you wish for? He asked. I wished for all of us to be okay again. He didn't respond for a moment. Then he whispered, "I wish for that too." He placed his lantern in the water with slow, careful hands. His eyes glimmered, not with the reflection of the flame, but with tears he fought to hold back. I didn't say anything. I just slipped my hand into his. And for the first time in a long time, he held it tightly. Once finished, our little studio became our favorite place. We spent mornings painting, afternoons writing ideas in notebooks, evenings talking about anything and everything. I drew him once, sitting by the window, sunlight on his face. When I showed him the sketch, he laughed. "You made me look too handsome." "You are handsome," I said. He rolled his eyes but smiled. He wrote poems, too, soft, fragile poems that carried emotions he never said out loud. One evening he left his notebook open. I read a small piece before he returned. It said, "The world is heavy but the fields are light. The city drowns me but the wind holds me. I am trying to breathe again." Those words broke something inside me. I realized then that Dara was hurting more deeply than I knew. It happened on a rainy afternoon. The storm had come suddenly, and we ran into the studio for shelter. The rain hit the roof like drumming fingers, and the air smelled of wet earth. Dara sat on the bamboo floor, his knees pulled to his chest. "Can I tell you something?" he asked. "Anything." He took a long breath, then said, "I didn't come to the countryside just for space. I failed university." I was shocked. "You failed?" "I was too stressed. Too overwhelmed. I stopped attending classes. I didn't tell Mom. She doesn't know. I didn't know how to face her. And then they separated, and everything got worse. I felt like I disappointed everyone." His voice shook. I didn't know who I was anymore. I sat beside him, slowly. "Dara, why didn't you tell me?" "Because you always looked up to me," he whispered. "I didn't want you to see me fall apart." I took his hand. "You're my brother. I look up to you not because you're perfect, but because you're you. And you're trying. That's enough." The rain softened, and so did his tears. He leaned his head on my shoulder, and for the first time, he allowed himself to break openly. And I held him, because sometimes, love means being the shelter when someone else collapses. After that day, things changed. Dara became more honest, with me, with himself. He didn't hide his sadness. He didn't pretend to be okay. And I became stronger too, no longer the confused girl who arrived with a storm inside her heart. We healed each other, day by day, project by project, conversation by conversation. We created paintings, messy, colorful, full of life. We wrote stories, some sad, some hopeful. We sang old songs grandmother taught us. We cooked, cleaned, laughed, argued, and learned. We became siblings again, not just by blood, but by choice, by effort, by understanding. Our studio was no longer just a building. It was our sanctuary, our reminder, our symbol of survival. The night before we were to return to the city, Dara and I sat outside the studio, watching fireflies. "I'm scared," he admitted softly. "Of what?" "Going back. Facing everything. Trying again." I took a slow breath. "We'll face it together," I said. "You're not alone anymore." He looked at me with quiet gratitude. "You're stronger than you think," he said. "So are you," I replied. The moon rose slowly, and the studio behind us glowed softly from the inside. The wind carried the sound of our wind chime. Everything felt still. Everything felt whole. For the first time in a long time, I believed we would be okay. Before sleeping that night, Dara placed his notebook on my lap. "What's this?" I asked. "A promise," he said. "Open it." Inside, on the last page, he had written, "No matter how far we go, no matter how hard life becomes, We will always come back here. To create again. Tears filled my eyes. I'll keep this forever, I said. He smiled. Then it means everything. We did go back to the city. And life wasn't easy. Not for him. Not for me. But we tried. We worked. We healed. We grew. Dara eventually returned to university, not because he was forced, but because he rediscovered his love for learning. I pursued art again, sketching every moment I didn't want to forget. And every year, without fail, we returned to the countryside for a week. We cleaned the studio. We added something new. We created paintings, poems, stories, sculptures. We talked about life, dreams, heartbreaks, and hopes. And sometimes, when the lanterns floated gently on the pond, I remembered the girl I used to be and the brother who pulled her back from losing herself. The countryside didn't just give us peace. It gave us each other again. Looking back now, I realize something. We weren't just building a studio. We were building ourselves. Piece by piece. Heart by heart. We learned that creation is healing. That love is a quiet force. That family is chosen every day, not by blood, but by the willingness to stay and understand. And we learned that no matter how heavy the world becomes, the countryside will always hold space for soft moments, for broken hearts, for second chances. I still keep Dara's notebook. The ink has faded a little, but the promise remains. And every time I read it, my heart remembers. We will always come back here. To create again.